I always knew my parents had a favorite, and it was never me. They didn't say it out loud, but the way they treated my younger sister Lily made it obvious. When it came time for college, my parents proudly told everyone they would be paying for Lily's entire education. They helped her pick the best school, paid for her apartment near campus, covered her books, and even gave her extra spending money. But when I asked about my own college plans, the answer was completely different. My dad simply said they couldn't afford to pay for 2 colleges. That was the end of the conversation. So while Lily started her college life with financial support and freedom, I started mine with 2 part-time jobs, scholarships, and student loans. Most mornings began before sunrise at a small coffee shop near campus, and most nights ended after tutoring high school students just to afford my textbooks. It was exhausting, but I kept going because I knew no one else was going to carry me through this. Meanwhile, Lily's social media was full of photos from sorority events, parties, and weekend trips with friends. My parents called her almost every day to check how she was doing. They rarely called me unless they needed help with something. For years passed like that. 4 long years of stress, studying, and working harder than I ever thought I could. My parents never once visited my campus. They never asked about my grades or my classes. When graduation week arrived, they finally showed up, but not for me. They came to celebrate Lily receiving a small recognition award from her department. I was just another student sitting quietly among hundreds of graduates in the auditorium. Then the dean walked up to the podium and began announcing the final awards of the ceremony. The room was calm, filled with polite applause. But when he paused before the last announcement, something about his tone made everyone listen more carefully. "And now," he said, adjusting the microphone, "the valedictorian of this graduating class is—" The entire hall went silent. When he finally said my name, the applause exploded around the room. And for the first time that day, my parents turned around in complete shock because they had no idea what I had been accomplishing all these years. For a moment, I thought I had heard the dean wrong. My name echoed through the auditorium speakers, and suddenly everyone around me was clapping. Some of my classmates stood up, cheering and patting my shoulders as I slowly rose from my seat. My heart was racing, but my face stayed calm as I walked toward the stage. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at the section where my parents and Lily were sitting. My sister looked confused, her smile completely gone. My mom was whispering something to my dad, and he looked like he had just realized he'd missed an important part of the story. When I reached the stage, the dean shook my hand firmly and smiled. 4 years of exceptional academic performance, he announced into the microphone. A perfect GPA, while working multiple jobs and funding their own education. The audience reacted with a louder round of applause. Some professors in the front row nodded proudly. People who had seen me rushing from class to work, then back to the library late at night. My parents, however, looked completely stunned. It was obvious they were hearing most of this for the first time. The dean handed me the medal and stepped aside so I could give the valedictorian speech. As I stood behind the podium, I looked out over the crowd. Hundreds of faces stared back at me, but my eyes briefly found my family sitting together. Lily looked uncomfortable, shifting in her chair. My parents looked frozen, unsure whether to smile or stay quiet. I took a slow breath before speaking. I thanked my professors, the mentors who had guided me, and the friends who had helped me survive the long nights of studying and working. The words came out steady and clear. Then I paused for a second, letting the room settle into silence. "I also want to thank the people who didn't support me," I said calmly. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd as people leaned forward to listen. Because when you realize you're on your own, you learn just how strong you can become. The room stayed silent for a moment before the applause started again, louder this time. I stepped away from the podium and shook the dean's hand once more before walking off the stage. As I returned to my seat, I could feel eyes following me, but I kept my expression neutral. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The truth had already been said out loud. After the ceremony ended, the graduates began gathering with their families in the hall outside. My parents hurried toward me through the crowd. My mom reached me first, her face a mixture of confusion and forced pride. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" she asked quickly, like she was trying to fix something that had already broken. I looked at her for a moment before answering. "You never asked." My dad cleared his throat, glancing around as if he hoped no one nearby had heard that. "Well, we're proud of you," he said awkwardly. The words sounded strange, like they had been pulled out at the last second because he couldn't think of anything else. Lily stayed quiet behind them, staring at the medal hanging around my neck. For the first time in years, no one in the family seemed to know what to say. And standing there in the middle of the crowded hall, I realized something important. They had spent years assuming I would always be the quiet, overlooked one. But now the entire room knew the truth. A week after graduation, the excitement of the ceremony had faded, and life started moving forward again. I packed my small apartment slowly, folding the same clothes I had worn through years of early shifts and late-night study sessions. Most of what I owned could fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. It wasn't much, but every single thing represented something I had earned myself. On the kitchen table sat the letter that had changed everything: a job offer from a consulting firm in another city, good salary, full benefits, and a fresh start far away from the place where I had spent 4 years proving my worth without anyone noticing. For the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Not excited, not angry, just steady. I didn't need approval anymore. I had built something on my own, piece by piece, while everyone else assumed I would always stay in the background. A few days before I left the city, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice sounded softer than usual, almost careful. She started by saying how proud they were of me and how the graduation ceremony had surprised them. She mentioned that relatives had been talking about my speech and how impressive it was. For a moment, it sounded like they were trying to rewrite the past, like they had always been part of the journey. Then her tone shifted slightly. "Well," she said, "now that you're starting such a good job, we were thinking maybe you could help Lily a little. She has some student loans left, and things are a bit tight for her right now." I stayed quiet for a second, letting the words settle. It wasn't anger I felt. It was clarity. For years, I had watched them pour their resources, attention, and faith into Lily while I figured everything out on my own. Now that my hard work had finally paid off, they wanted to share the result. I spoke calmly. "I hope Lily does well," I said, "but her education was your investment." The line went silent. No arguing, no raised voices, just a long pause where the truth sat between us. After we hung up, I looked around the empty apartment one last time. Those years had been hard, but they had also given me something important: independence. I didn't need to chase anyone's approval anymore, because in the end, my parents didn't lose a daughter that day.